Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another episode of True Crime and Makeup. Today we are covering the case of Harold Shipman. Yeah, I know. He's an awful man. They're all awful, we know this, but what this man did was just absolutely devastating to the people of the UK, specifically in Manchester. This man's body count is between 250 to 450, okay? And only 15 of these victims would actually be confirmed as his victims. This man was a doctor that families and patients put all of their trust in to make their loved ones better or to make their condition better, and this man took advantage of them in the most horrific way. He would cause his patients to overdose on diamorphine. He would rig their medical records so it looked as though they had prior illnesses, that they were in poor health, when really they weren't. He would target the elderly and the vulnerable, so even if you were younger but you had a vulnerability in your health, he would take advantage of that and target you. Now, the outcome of this case is absolutely horrific, and the people affected by this case still remain horrified at the outcome of this, and I think you'll feel the same by the end of this as well. Before we do get into the case, please make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is every Wednesday and Sunday. Make sure you engage in the video in some way. If you've enjoyed it, a like, a comment, a share, all three if you can would be amazing, so we can get my videos pushed out into the algorithm and hopefully build this audience even more. Also, just need to shout out my dad. My dad gave me this case recommendation and he has been on my back for months to get this covered, right? So I'm doing this for my dad, and it's been intense, guys. Like, honestly, like, blink twice if my dad's sitting there watching me. He's not, but wouldn't surprise me. But the case is now covered, Dad, so back off. But I guess without any further rambling or any further ado, let's get into the horrific case of Harold Shipman. So Harold Frederick Shipman, he was born on January the 14th, 1946, and he was the second of three children to Harold Frederick Shipman, same names, Senior, and Vera Britton. Now, both of Shipman's parents were devout Methodists, and Harold Senior, he was a lorry driver. Now, Harold Shipman, he was born on a council estate within Nottingham, and that was called Bestwood Estate. And throughout school, Harold Shipman was a very promising student. Like, he really excelled, and not only did he excel academically, but he was also quite the sportsman, which, crazy. Usually academics and sports, you're either gifted with one or the other, but he was gifted in both areas. Now, he excelled particularly in rugby and long distance running. Pretty cool. Now, out of both of Shipman's parents, he was much closer to his mum Vera, and devastatingly, his whole world would be turned upside down at the age of 17 when Vera Britton would be diagnosed with terminal cancer. Now, of course, Shipman being so close to his mum, this was heartbreaking for him, and I can't even imagine having to go through something like that at such a young age, especially when she was his everything. Now, the death of Shipman's mother, that is something that Harold himself would later mirror throughout his own killings. It was almost in the moment of his mother's death when he gathered his sadistic and murderous ideals. Now, of course, with Vera's condition being terminal, as it was getting to the later stages of her disease, Harold Shipman would witness the doctors administer morphine to Vera, and when they did this, he witnessed his mother's pain and suffering subside for the moment. And this was something that seemed to really fascinate him, and any time the doctor was administering the morphine, he was just in awe watching this. He was kind of obsessed with it in a very creepy way. Now, just when Shipman felt like things could not get any worse, his mother Vera devastatingly passed away on the 21st of June 1963, And it is said that the passing of Shipman's mother was the very thing that inspired him to dedicate his life to medicine. And this should have been a positive success story of a man who cared deeply for his patients and just wanted to help them. But instead of being something so positive, it just turned so sinister so quick. Now, following on from his mother's death, Shipman would go on to marry a woman by the name of Primrose May Oxtoby, and they got married whilst he was studying medicine at Leeds University Medical Centre. Now, Shipman and Oxtoby, they would go on to have 4 children together. From the outside looking in, it looked like a pretty normal, happy relationship. They seemed like a very happy couple. They complemented each other apparently. They went really well together. But this would not be the case because Harold Shipman was basically leading a double life, as a lot of these monsters do. And then in 1970, Harold Shipman, he graduated and life as a junior doctor commenced. So yet again, seeing a man who could go on to be very successful, earn a very nice, comfortable living for himself, but he's going to throw all of this to waste. Also, I am not convinced that this eye makeup does not look like diarrhea or just, poop in general. But we're going to keep going with it and see if I can fix it. Honestly, it really pains me to say this about these people, right? But somehow they seem to thrive in their working environments. Why can us normal people not thrive as much as these murderers, It's not fair. But anyway, so as a junior doctor, he very, very quickly worked his way up the ranks. People really liked him. He was reliable, he was trustworthy, he just loved medicine and helping people, apparently. So Shipman goes on and he starts working at Pontefract General Infirmary, and this would be in West Riding of Yorkshire. Then in 1974, he took his first position as a GP, so a general practitioner. This was at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Centre. Now, a year, right, just 1 year after getting this position, Harold Shipman was caught forging prescriptions, okay? Really bad stuff. You don't do that. Now, the prescriptions that he was forging was for Demerol, which is an opioid substance, and it's usually used to treat, severe pain, end-of-life pain, all that jazz. Now, it turns out Harold Shipman himself was addicted to Demerol. Now, because he did have an addiction, he was slapped with a £600 fine, and then he was forced into a rehabilitation centre in York. So, the people that he works with, getting him help, that's great. Let's end that there. But it gets worse. So Shipman, he went away, worked on himself, apparently. Did he really? No, he didn't. But he went away and came back to work in 1977, and at this point he is working at the Donnybrook Medical Centre in Hyde. Now, he would remain at Donnybrook for 15 years before he went on to open his own practice. He would open his own in 1993, and he was a one-man band. This is bad. Listen, I hate saying stuff like this. It's so cliche, but it's true here. So Harold Shipman, he was a well-respected physician and a really well-liked member of the community. Just the typical things that you hear, they're always well-respected, but he really, really was. And patients really seemed to trust him, which, of course, devastatingly, most of their trust would be misplaced in this man. Somehow he was able to amass over 3,000 patients. I need to know how he's balancing these patients, right? Because if I phone the doctors for an appointment, it's like 6 months' time. By that time, my illness has either progressed or I'm not feeling the way I felt anymore. So, 3,000 patients, how are we balancing that? He's a one-man band. So they were able to trace back to what they believe to be the very first murder of Harold Shipman, the first of hundreds that he would commit. And this was traced back to March of 1975. So this would have been before he initially went into rehab. Now, the first victim of Harold Shipman was a 70-year-old woman by the name of Eva Lyons, and he would fatally target her the day before her 71st birthday. Eva, she was sadly undergoing treatment for cancer. Now, her treatment did seem to be, stabilising her condition as much as it possibly could, right up until one fateful evening when Harold Shipman would make a late night house call to Eva to administer something for the pain that she was feeling. What Shipman proceeded to do is he would administer a fatal dose of diamorphine via the back of Eva Lyons' hand. Now, after he did this, he requested a cup of coffee, which Eva Lyons' husband went to go and get. And when Eva's husband came back into the room, Harold Shipman told her husband Richard, "I'm sorry to say, she's dead." And apparently he said it so brazenly. Like, there was no emotion, there was no actual real sign of him being sorry or apologetic. He did not seem to care that Eva had died. Now, bearing in mind when Harold Shipman went into their house that night, fair enough, Eva was undergoing treatment for cancer, but she was not near death. And the part that's just so horrific, I mean, all of it's horrific, but this part just really got to me. Eva's family, they wouldn't even know that she had been a victim of Harold Shipman's until 2002, when the list of 215 of his victims was released and Eva's name was on that list. Eva's husband Richard, he actually went to his grave not knowing what had happened to his wife, not understanding what that situation was. I mean, he remembers being a bit confused as to why he was administering this in the back of her hand, because they had never done this before. But I guess at the time he's far too distraught. I mean, his wife's just died. He's maybe not going to overthink it. And with Harold Shipman, he was so well liked, well trusted. He was well respected in the community. He was meant to be this great physician who was known to have a really nice bedside manner. He didn't really have any reason to doubt Harold Shipman and not trust him, which is, it's just devastating, the fact that he's had to go to his grave not knowing really what happened to his wife. It was round about this same time that Harold Shipman had got his hands on enough diamorphine to kill hundreds of people. Now, as we know, at this point, Harold Shipman is going through an addiction with diamorphine, but his colleagues and co-workers, they wouldn't know this until the following year. Now, Shipman would be fired again for forging prescriptions, but somehow he was still not removed from the General Medical Council, which is the doctor's regulatory body. He wasn't removed from this, but he did receive a warning. Wow, a warning. Lesson learned. He's not going to do anything else. He's going to behave, stop forging prescriptions, stop killing people, because a warning? Wow, that's a big deal. Like, why are we not just removing this? Take away his medical licence. Take it away. Now, Shipman, he would just continue doing what he was doing. He continued on with his killings. It is said that during his reign of terror, he would have multiple times where his killings would stop and then restart again. Now, I don't know if this was like to prevent suspicions arising, or was he thinking about changing? Doubt it. I don't know, but I think he was just trying his best not to get caught, if I'm honest. Now, despite these multiple occasions where he would stop and restart his killings, his method of killing never ever changed. Excuse the way I'm going to put this, but it's because he got his method down to a fine art. He had a way of covering things up, and this really worked for the longest time. Now, Harold Shipman, he would always target the same group of individuals, and that would be either the vulnerable or the elderly. Now, his oldest victim was 93-year-old Anne Cooper, and Shipman's youngest victim would be 41-year-old Peter Lewis. So whilst the ages do seem to range, as long as a person is vulnerable, he will target them. And of course, the method remains the same. So he would administer a lethal, deadly, fatal dose of diamorphine, and then he would either watch his patients die right in front of him, or he would send them home to die. Administering this fatal dose and then sending someone home to die. It's just awful. Now, it is believed that Harold Shipman probably killed 71 patients during his time at Donnybrook, and then the remainder of his victims would have been during his time at his own medical practice. Now, 171 of these patients would be female, and 44 would be male. Now, Shipman, he would just continue killing and continue on this brazen, horrific killing spree that he was on. However, in 1998, suspicions would arise, and that really should be where this case ends. But it's not. Now, it was undertakers in the community of Hyde that would first, raise the alarm for Harold Shipman. Now, Dr. Linda Reynolds of the Brook Surgery, she expressed her concerns to John Pollard, who was the coroner for the South Manchester district. Now, the reason that she raised the alarm to John Pollard was the fact that she discovered that Harold Shipman's death rate of his patients was 10 times higher than theirs. 10 times higher than what it really should be or what it would be expected to be. Now, in particular, she was concerned about the large number of forms of elderly women who have passed away in Harold Shipman's care that he had requested be countersigned. Both of them agree that this is really strange and it needs to be reported, so they go to the Manchester police and express their concerns, lay the facts out on the table for them of why they think something really sinister is going on here, and this should be where the story ends. But it's not. Also, quick apology, because when I'm getting up close and personal whilst I'm trying to finish off my eyes, I'm seeing how unsymmetrical these two are. They're not even in the same postcode area, so let's ignore that. Now, this police investigation, right? It's an absolute shambles. I'm not even going to lie to you. It's bad. So they failed to carry out the most basic checks when looking into Harold Shipman. And this included checking if he had a criminal record. If they had went to the board and asked for his file, his record, they would have seen his past for forging prescriptions for Demerol, diamorphine. And obviously, no hate to the police, they do fantastic work, they really, really do the majority of the time, but it is the most basic thing to check if someone's got a criminal record. I'm sure myself and everyone watching this video will agree that if we were having to look into someone, if someone had been flagged to us, the first thing I would think is, okay, what's their record like? Do they have any previous? Come on. What's so infuriating as well is Harold Shipman really did do the most to conceal his crimes. He was playing about with the victims' medical records. He was falsifying their details, saying that they had, underlying illnesses that could have been the cause of death. All this crazy stuff. Now, because he had added on all these false illnesses that, could result in someone's death, the police did not have any concerns regarding his files or the patients and how they died, so Harold Shipman was free to keep on killing. And the investigation was officially closed on the 17th of April. What's going on here? What's even more insane is that the community of Hyde, they were referring to Harold Shipman as Dr. Death. See if you had a doctor's appointment and you wound up having an appointment with Harold Shipman, your pal would be like, oh, you're going to go see Dr. Death, hope you come back. And some people wouldn't. If the whole community is referring to this man as Dr. Death, take away his licence, because quite clearly there's a problem. Now, the Manchester police, they would later be blamed for the continued killings of Harold Shipman, which yeah. And their response was that they had inexperienced officers working the case, and so the appropriate investigative techniques were not carried out. That doesn't look any better for you. That really, I think you think you're saving yourself and you're really not. This is looking even worse, because number one, why would you assign inexperienced officers to what was a very high profile case where deaths are occurring left, right and centre? Why would you put an inexperienced officer on this case? Why are you not teaching your officers better? Listen, the community of Hyde was literally doing God's work, right? And Shipman, although he was kind of going under the radar, he wasn't really, because people in the community were noticing things. So there was a taxi driver by the name of John Shaw, and he had went to the police just a few months after this initial investigation, and he expressed concerns regarding Harold Shipman. He believed that Harold Shipman might have been responsible for the death of 21 patients. Now, John Shaw, he was a taxi driver for a lot of the patients going to the hospital, and he happened to notice when he was taking in these patients, they seemed in good enough health, and then suddenly they weren't coming back out, or they were coming home and dying. And it just seemed really off to John Shaw that these patients were dying after being under the care of Harold Shipman, especially when they've went in like good health, good spirits. Like, it really doesn't make sense. And why is it taking another member of the community to express their concerns before the police even look into anything? Now, luckily, before I do get too crabby and frustrated with this case, we are going to start talking about the downfall of Harold Shipman. Praise the Lord. So the last known patient of Harold Shipman and the last known victim was Kathleen Grundy. Now, Kathleen Grundy was a very, very highly respected woman of the community. She was a former mayor of Hyde, so she was known to everyone. Now, devastatingly, Kathleen Grundy, she would be found dead in her home on the 24th of June 1998. And who was the last person to see her alive, I hear you all ask? Well, it was Harold Shipman. Of course, Harold Shipman, right? He signs the death certificate for Kathleen Grundy and attributes her death to old age and natural causes. Now, Kathleen's daughter, Angela Woodruff, she was a solicitor, and she was a bit suspicious, right? But her suspicions would be confirmed when a fellow solicitor by the name of Brian Burgess came to her and expressed his concerns. Now, it turns out that apparently Kathleen Grundy had, made a will at the very last minute, and Brian Burgess had some serious doubts about the authenticity of this will, and he wanted Angela to come have a look at it. Now, this will that Kathleen had, apparently done pretty last minute, completely wrote out her daughter and her children from her will. Now, she was going to leave £386,000 to one person and one person only, Harold Shipman. Now, immediately, Angela Woodruff is suspicious, because why on earth would her mum write her and her children out of her will and give it all to a man who she does not have any other relationship with apart from him being her doctor? Now, it turns out that once Harold Shipman had administered the lethal dose of diamorphine, he then ticked the box on Kathleen Grundy's will for cremation. Now, he wanted her cremated because he hoped that this would hide the evidence of her murder. And then if she's not been murdered, and if she's been in her right mind leaving the will and, the money to Shipman, then hopefully the police wouldn't question it. And listen, they might not have questioned it unless Angela Woodruff and Brian Burgess got involved. So like we were saying, immediately Angela Woodruff, she knows that something is not right, and with some urging from Brian Burgess, she decides that she has to contact the police and express her and Brian's concerns about what's went on here. Now, the police would launch another investigation, and thankfully, this one would go a lot better than the first. Now, police decided the best thing to do was exhume Kathleen Grundy's body. Now, this would take place in August of 1998, and when they tested her body, they found traces of diamorphine, heroin, in her muscle tissue. Now, I couldn't get it confirmed. Obviously, Kathleen Grundy was meant to be cremated, but they've exhumed her body, so I'm assuming that cremation didn't go ahead. Now, when the police had brought this to Harold Shipman, why is there diamorphine in her muscle tissue? Shipman, very fast on his feet, he said that Kathleen Grundy was an addict. She was addicted to diamorphine, and he actually had notes that could back this up in his little computerized medical journal. So the police, they have a look and they see detailed notes regarding the addiction that Kathleen Grundy had to diamorphine. I should say the addiction because it didn't exist. The police this time decide, let's use our brains. Let's utilise this thing up here, let's use it. So they decide to have the computer examined, which shows that Harold Shipman had put in the notes about her being addicted to diamorphine after she had passed away. Now, Harold, I have a question for you. Are you trying to tell us, Harold, that Kathleen Grundy became an addict in the afterlife? How are we making that communication? Because, if it's after her death, I'm assuming that she took up this addiction, once she passed the pearly gates. Honestly, the man's an absolute doughball. You can't write this. Now, on September the 7th, 1998, Harold Shipman would finally be arrested. Thank God, police actually doing good work here. And the police had discovered that Harold Shipman owned a Brother typewriter. I had no idea what this is, right? I don't know my typewriters, shoot me. But this was apparently the type of typewriter that was used to type up Kathleen Grundy's will. The will. Now, there's speculation regarding why Harold Shipman wanted Kathleen Grundy to leave her fortune to him. Now, some speculate it's because he wanted to retire at the age of 55 and leave the UK, flee, be on the run. Maybe he knew his time was coming, people were on him. I mean, he was being called Dr. Death in the community. And then there's other people that speculate that maybe Harold Shipman was sick and tired of the life that he was leading. It was getting out of control. He didn't want to kill anymore and he actually wanted to be caught. Which, I'm sorry, but if you're going to ask me what my opinion is, I'm certainly going to go with the first one because I do not believe for a second that this man cared about what he was doing and wanted to be caught. I think he was trying to sail away into the sunset. Now, over the next 2 months, 11 more of Harold Shipman's suspected victims would be exhumed for testing, and they were able to discover a pattern in the method of his killings. So he would administer this lethal fatal dose of diamorphine, and then he was signing the death certificates to say, natural causes, old age, blah, 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 things that didn't look suspicious. And then he was falsifying his patients' medical records to make it look like they had some sort of prior illness that could have played in their death. He was trying to make out that they were in poor health, so the death was less surprising, which, of course, to the family members who live with them and know them, they know that this isn't true. Now, they were also able to discover the majority of the deaths of the victims of Harold Shipman happened at the same time of day. This would usually be when Harold Shipman was out on his afternoon visits. It's all making sense now. But as you can probably imagine, Harold Shipman himself, he always denied these murders. He refused to cooperate with the police. And when he was being questioned by the police, they would try to show him, photos of the victims, files on the victims, and Harold Shipman would close his eyes, yawn, look away, or just sit with his eyes shut so he did not have to look at the photos. The man could not have been less interested in trying to cooperate. Now, it's really devastating, but the police did only have enough hard evidence to convict Harold Shipman of 15 of the murders. However, it is believed that his victim count is actually somewhere between 250 to 450, which is just heartbreaking, devastating, horrific. Every single awful word that you can think of is what I think of that. How this man operated for so long and did not get caught. I have no words, to be honest, but what I am going to do is the 15 victims who were initially named, I'm just going to read through their names now, and hopefully I'll be able to find, some photographs of them. Of course, there is more victims. There's a big list of victims online, but they are suspected victims. They haven't been confirmed with hard evidence, although they are the victims of Harold Shipman. So the confirmed victims that we have is Marie West, 81, Irene Turner, 67, Lizzie Adams, 77, Jean Lilly, 59, Ivy Lomas, 63, Muriel Grimshaw, 76, Marie Quinn, 67, Kathleen Wagstaff, 81, Bianca Pomfrey, 49, Nora Nuttall, 65, Pamela Hillier, 68, Maureen Ward, 57, Winifred Mellor, 73, Joan Melia, 73, and Kathleen Grundy, 81. On January the 31st, 2000, after 6 days of deliberation, the jury found Harold Shipman guilty. Now, Mr. Justice Forbes, he sentenced Harold Shipman to life in prison. He also received a concurrent sentence of 4 years for the forgery of Kathleen Grundy's will. And then on February the 11th, 2000, Harold Shipman was finally struck off of the medical register. Now, Harold Shipman was originally incarcerated in Manchester Prison, however, he would wind up in Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire. Now, whilst he was in prison, he would become best friends with another serial killer by the name of Peter Moore. If you would like me to cover Peter Moore, let me know in the comments and I'll do that. But, you know, horrific people meeting horrific people and forming friendships, that's what they do. Now, in 2002, a list of Shipman's victims and suspected victims would be released in the Shipman's inquiry report, and devastatingly, like I said earlier, these numbers would be in the hundreds. Reports did continue to be issued over the years when there was any sort of recommendations for medical practices or when any other victims were uncovered, and the last report was issued in 2005. Now, this confirmed, you know, some more suspected victims and also further recommendations for medical practices to take on board. Now, on the 13th of January 2004, the day before his birthday, at the age of 57, Harold Shipman hung himself in his own prison cell with his own bed sheets. This man got off easy. He chose when to take his life. Unlike his victims, he got off so easy, and it's no surprise to me, and I'm sure it's no surprise to you, that the families of his victims feel completely cheated that he got off so easy. And I hate to sound horrible, but this man should have suffered, whether it be at the hands of other prison inmates, but this man should have suffered. And I think as well, what's even harder for the families is this man's killed himself, ended his life without taking any accountability or responsibility and without ever providing an explanation as to why he did what he did. Now, changes to standard medical procedures within the UK did happen as a result of the Shipman inquiry report. Now, this was known as the Shipman effect, right? So some medical practices, they were so scared of over-prescribing to their patients that they actually started to under-prescribe. You know, they weren't given the appropriate dose for their patients because they were so worried that an overdose might occur and then this accidental death might be looked at as a Harold Shipman death. I would say the biggest change and the most positive change that came from the Shipman inquiry report was the fact that, you know, one-man medical practices kind of ceased to exist, and it was now multi-practitioner medical practices that were brought in. So, you know, if someone was up to no good, it's more likely that that would be picked up right away, rather than in a one-man practice where no one's around to see what's going on. Another change that was brought about within England and Wales was changes and amendments to the question on cremation forms. So they altered some of their questions, and I'm going to read out 2 examples that I've got in front of me just now, and I think it's really great that they've put this in place because it actually gives people the chance to speak up when they feel they might not be able to. So the 2 questions that they've brought in are: do you know or suspect that the death of the person who has died was violent or unnatural? Do you consider that there should be any further examination of the remains of the person who has died? To this very day, it will come as no surprise that the families of Shipman's victims remain absolutely devastated at the outcome of this case. The fact that he killed himself, the fact that he took that easy way out compared to what he done as victims. I can only hope and pray that their loved ones who did sadly lose their lives are at peace now, and hopefully the family somehow can gain some closure along the way. But I think we all should send thoughts, prayers, love to those families because they will definitely be needing it. So my loves, that is the end of another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope you found this one interesting. I know it is a well-known case, but it's not really a well-covered case. I'm really hoping that by covering this case, it will keep my dad off my back because honestly, this guy, he really wanted the Harold Shipman case to be covered. So like, Dad, there you go, it's done. Remember, if you do enjoy my videos, to make sure that you like, comment and subscribe. Put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is every Wednesday and Sunday at 7:30 British Standard Time. Please, please, please engage with this video in some way, whether it's a like, a comment, a share. If you can do all three, that would be amazing, because I don't censor the things that I say on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't really like that, so they don't really push out my videos, so I need your help to push out the videos. I always say, you know, if you've watched and liked it, then, you know, maybe like and subscribe. Makes sense, right? Don't forget that any case suggestions that you have can be left in the comments down below, or you can send them over to my email, which you will find in the description box, alongside my social media handles, so my Instagram and my TikTok. If you want to give me a follow over there, that would mean the world to me. If you're interested in any of the products used on my face today, they will be linked down below for you as well, if there's anything that you want to look at or potentially pick up. But I appreciate every single one of you so much, and I cannot thank you enough for your love and support along the way. Stay safe, don't be a bad person, be a good person, look after each other, and until the next one, I will see you later. Bye!